I feel like we have a lot of follow-up.
We do. Just wait till next time. There's going to be even more.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was looking towards the end of this outline and looking at the action items for the end of this show. And okay, we may need to hustle through the book part because we've got a lot of follow-up. We've got a lot of action items at the end. So we'll see how this actually lands.
Sure.
I'll go first here. I have 3, and I think I've only really touched 1. So I am going to need to carry this over. And number 1 was reevaluate my mission statement. And to be honest with you, I really didn't get that done at all because I got caught up in a whole process of reevaluating a mission statement for one of my websites. So I didn't get my personal one done. But I've been working on mission statements a lot lately. So kind of the way it works. So that one I haven't touched at all. Sad day.
All right. So what about the second one, readjusting your online presence? I assume these are related, so I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, to a point. I was making this adjustment about being more open about my faith online. And this one I don't know that you can say is ever really done, but at the same time, the mindset has been shifted. So I'm going to say this one's in good shape. But I haven't been in a place where it's really become anything significantly different for what I normally do online. So I can't say that there's anything you can go look at to say this is done, but the mindset shift has definitely been adjusted. So I don't know what to say on that one other than it's on its way. So I'm going to say it's in good shape.
I think you could check that one off, to be honest. As long as the mindset shift has happened,
okay,
then I think that's really all you need for a quote-unquote definition of done. I think that when it comes to your mission or really just anything that you throw out publicly, the only thing you can do is really be authentic from where you are right now. And I look back at some of the stuff that I wrote or created and I'm like, man, what was I thinking? But it's okay. Like, it doesn't really bother me like I thought it would because I have this obsession, I guess, with being correct and not wanting to be wrong or share wrong information. And I think I've talked on this podcast for a long time. That meant that like I like to write songs, and in particular worship songs that we sing a couple of them at my church. And for a long time, I didn't write anything because I didn't want to be theologically incorrect. And I realized finally that like that doesn't really matter. By trying to not make a mistake, you're getting away from the whole heart of it in the first place, which is just worship is supposed to be like coming out of your heart. It's supposed to be a reflection of who you are and your attitude towards something. And I was so paralyzed by not wanting to be wrong that really I was wrong because I wasn't being authentic. I think that there's a very important distinction between practicing what you preach and preaching what you practice. Practicing what you preach, you throw something out there and then you try to live up to it. But when you are preaching what you practice, like you've established the habits and it's things that you do consistently. And then that's what you write about. That's what you talk about. That's what you create. Like there's authenticity in that people can see, which is important because if you're not authentic, you're going to lose credibility in the eyes of other people. But more importantly, you're going to lose credibility in your own eyes. And you're going to say, well, I don't do what I say I do. So what's the point?
I think my action item just struck a chord with Mike.
Yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. So
that's fair. That's fair. It's good to hear that we're kind of on the same path here.
Hopefully you're encouraged by that, though.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's not something that, like, you have to dot all the I's and cross all the T's, and then you're like, okay, finally, my mission is now ready.
Right.
Like, you are who you are, and as long as you are who you are, and you're not trying to be something that you're not, then you've succeeded.
I like it. Last one here, write out my life goals. I thought about it once. That doesn't count.
No, probably not.
I'm going to let that one carry over. So not shooting too good here. I'm 33% on my action items from last round. So sad day, but we'll talk about them again next time, which means that next round's follow-up for action items is going to be, we're going to set aside like 45 minutes just to talk action items next time.
We may have to have a B-sides just for our action items.
I know. Though we are coming up on number 50. So
that's true.
We're going to have to do something special for number 50, I think.
Yeah, I'll have to have a thought about that.
Just one thought.
It's only 4 episodes away. Crazy.
You only get one thought about it.
Okay, just one.
All right, your turn.
All right. So all of these, I was nervous about you putting these on here because I'm like, how are we going to talk about these? But that's par for the course, I guess, at this point.
Yep.
So the long-term one, which is kind of the one that I was hoping wouldn't get on here because I have nothing to share with this.
You realize I just copy paste, right?
Yep.
I just pull the action items off last time and paste a minute to follow up for the next. You're aware of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Typos and everything. It all comes across.
I don't know. I guess I kind of was hoping in the back of my mind you'd miss one, but oh well. So yeah, the long-term planning a sabbatical, I don't have any progress with this. I really don't know when this is going to happen, how it's going to happen. I also, right now, don't really want it to happen anytime soon because I just went through reevaluating like everything that I'm committed to, and I love all the stuff I get to do. So having to take a break from it seems kind of weird. But anyways, it'll happen at some point. Long-term follow-up.
Okay.
Just like my office.
Yes.
Second one, plan weeks at 75%. I don't have a percentage, but I feel like I've done a pretty good job of this. And the way that I've implemented this is shared with you the Dominate Your Day template that I created. It's kind of the Cal Newport manual time blocking. And I've been breaking down my time throughout the day based on 1 hour time blocks and overestimating. So I have found that my most important tasks, the things I put on that list that like I really want to get these done, and even the things that I'm like, it'd be awesome today if this happened, I've consistently been hitting all of those and not really being stressed out about it.
Nice.
Like I haven't felt a quote unquote time crunch. So I feel like I'm doing pretty good at this. I think if I need to dial it back and get closer to that 75% would be where I have things on there that I'm just not able to complete. We can revisit that. You know, it's probably worth revisiting maybe a couple months down the road to see if it's still working, because I don't really have a firm structure around that 75%, how to implement that. Just because, I don't know. I mean, I guess I could look at every single task and say, well, this should take an hour, but I'm going to budget 2, so that's 50%. But that just seems...
That's too much.
Like way more work than it's worth.
I'm going to say, don't do that.
I'm happy to know the 80-20.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah, exactly. Next one, give more than you get. I think that I've made the mindset shift here also, and really it's not even a mindset change. It's more so just reinforcing something that I've believed for a long time, but I'm trying to be more conscious about it. And I'm recognizing that there are a lot of really small opportunities for this, which if you don't approach it through this lens, it's really easy to miss. So for example, I mean, this is a really, really minor example, but I was on Mac Power Users a couple weeks ago and have had quite a few people who have reached out to me via email after that. And one guy in particular, he's like, I almost spit out my water when I heard you say you were in Appleton. So like, I couldn't believe there was somebody else in Appleton. So I actually met him for coffee this morning. First time I met the guy. We don't really know each other, and other than via email. And so what's standard protocol in that situation? Like, you each buy your drink, you go sit down, you talk, whatever. I just bought the guy coffee. You know, it cost me a couple bucks, but
right.
Who cares, you know? And he made a comment. He's like, oh, I didn't know I was going to get free coffee. Like, that's cool. You know, like I was able to give, and it cost me really nothing, you know?
Those are cool. I think those instances are really fun. I used to be extremely cautious about meeting people that I met online, and I don't really know why. And anymore, I feel like I'm doing that a fair amount. Like, it seems like about every 4-6 weeks I'm meeting up with somebody that I have no idea who they are. I don't know if that's a factor of me just doing client work or what that is.
It's the first time I think I've done it, and yeah, it was pretty cool. And I guess just a shout out to the Mac community in general. Like, I don't think I've met a single person from the Mac community who has turned out to be a jerk in all my experience. And I drove down to Mac Stock that one year and just to see what it was like. And I didn't know anybody there. And a lot of the people that were there were like, they brought their Apple user groups and stuff. And Dave Ginsburg, I know, is the suburban Chicago Apple users group. I met him the first time I was down there. I sat and ate lunch with those guys, and they were just like completely welcoming, and I don't know, we bonded over nerd stuff, but like it's cool because it's not that way in a lot of other places. And so I don't know, I guess being that this was a guy who listened to Mac Power Users, it's just another example of like, these people tend to be really welcoming, really, really fun, really just open people. And so I can't speak highly enough of the Mac community, and you should come to MacStock if you're listening to this right now and use Apple devices at all.
Yes, absolutely. And then you get to meet these really nice people. Like, for example, our friend who did the whole rating with the spreadsheets and bit, because they showed us that we had a missed rating for Monk and the Merchant. And I went back and I listened to the end of that episode and realized we did rate it. I just failed to get it on the website. So we did rate it, and it is out there. So there you go. So I filled in the gap. So we do just have the one episode we didn't rate, but other than that, they are all there. And then in other news, and I think this is probably a big one. Is this a big one? I think this is a big one.
It could potentially be a big one, which makes me a little bit nervous. But
yes. So last night, I got kind of a harebrained idea, and I texted Mike and said, here's what I'm thinking. You cool with that? And he said, sure. So then this morning, I put that thing in place and built it, and it now exists. We've played around with this concept a few times, I think, but we are introducing the Bookworm Club, and this lives at club.bookworm.fm. This is nothing less than a discourse community to jump in and have conversations about the episodes that we record and release. So each of the books that we read, there is now a conversation dedicated to them. They did exist technically before on the Productivity Guild, but it just never really felt like it was cohesive. And basically what I did was I took that category from the guild, exported it, created a whole community around that one. So now it has its own, but then those also get to be comments underneath of the episodes themselves on the bookworm.fm site. So any of the episodes that you go to at bookworm.fm, you'll see down at the bottom of those where you can have the conversations about those episodes. And it all revolves around this Bookworm Club site. And again, it's club.bookworm.fm. So if you're interested in having a chat about these episodes, you can check us out there as well. And I would imagine this is going to end up being part of our end of episode spiel now. That would be the appropriate way to handle this.
Yep. I would assume so. The thing that makes me a little bit nervous about this is just that I am pretty bad at checking comments on things. But I have pinned this tab, so hopefully I will look at it every day and just see what's new. But I think that this is a really cool idea and a really valuable resource for people who listen to Bookworm because they maybe don't want to read the whole book. They just want to hear us distill it. I think that probably wasn't the original intention behind the podcast when we launched it, but I've talked to several people now who that's kind of what they do is they use us as their vetting source for books. And I think that anytime that you can have any sort of discussion about what you're reading, it helps solidify it in your own mind. So I've noticed even like we'll get on the mic and we'll start talking about a particular book that we read, and I'll have a certain opinion, and then I'll hear you talk about stuff and I'll think through things and be like, oh, well, actually, Joe's got a good point. Yeah, I guess maybe I was off in this particular area. So even while we've been recording, like my opinion and rating of books have changed just as I talk through things. So I think it's cool that listeners can do that as well now too.
I don't think there's any coincidence that we don't put, it's obvious we work off of an outline whenever we're recording, and we always put the ratings bit at the bottom of that outline, but neither one of us ever fill in what our rating is until we get there. So it's always this surprise of, even for us, of what is this rating going to be? Because the conversation of getting there, like right now, I have a feeling of where I'm going to rate today's book, but I would imagine by the time we get there, that rating's changed. So I don't know if that's good or bad.
Yep.
But I think you made a good point here that we've learned a lot of people listen to Bookworm to get a good overview of a book, to help them to decide if they're going to read a book or not. Or sometimes they use it as a way to understand a book in and of itself with no plan to read it. So my thought on developing this club in this community is, we talk about these books and sometimes we get questions about those on Twitter or email. And sometimes I get the same questions multiple times. And this would be a great way to consolidate all of those. So if you're listening to us and there's a point that you feel like we didn't clarify, or there's a question about the book itself that you want our thoughts on, this is the one place we would point you to have that conversation and ask that question. It's kind of a way to keep it all in one place, if you will.
Yep, exactly. Is it fair to market Bookworm now as the internet's largest book club?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I guess I'll have to see how many people sign up.
I even made it easy. You can one-click sign in with Google or Twitter. So There you go.
You know why people listen to us instead of reading the books for themselves, Joe? It's because people are too busy. See what I did there?
Uh-huh. Nice. That's cheesy. Way to go.
Yeah, something else cheesy. I mean, we were originally set to record this last week, but you texted me and you're like, hey, can we move this? Because I'm not going to be able to finish the book.
Right.
I'm too busy.
Yep.
Smiley face.
That's exactly it. Yep. We were going to record this a week ago, and it didn't happen because I was busy.
The title of the book for today is, in fact, Busy. The subtitle is How to Thrive in a World of Too Much, and it's by Tony Crabbe. And this is a listener recommendation that I picked up in a bookstore because I saw it and it looked somewhat interesting, and I knew it was a listener recommendation at one point. So I figured, it's a couple bucks. I'll just buy it. And it's been on my bookshelf for quite a while. Didn't really know what to expect when we got into it, but I was pretty pleasantly surprised by this one. I didn't really think a whole lot of it based on the title or the cover, but you can't judge a book by its cover,
right.
It turns out.
Right.
One thing really cool about this book, by the way, is like right at the beginning in the preface and then the getting started, it's basically like how to find the time to read this book.
Yes.
And he's got 10 points here because he knows that what he's speaking to is the thing that could keep people from actually picking this book up and reading it. So I thought that was really cool.
It's very meta at the beginning because he is talking about the fact that you picked up a book about busyness, and that's likely because you're busy, but you're too busy to read it. So it's like this cyclical issue of this will help me overcome my busyness, but I'm too busy to help me overcome my busyness. So I did appreciate that he at least addressed that up front, because it was something that crossed my mind the moment that you mentioned that we were going to jump into this book. That was the first thing that went through my head. I was like, well, I feel like this is for an audience that won't read it. So
very true.
I was grateful he addressed that immediately.
I was talking to this guy at coffee this morning, and we were talking about Bookworm and the fact that we read so many books, and he mentioned to me that he doesn't read a ton of books, but he works in an industry where there are people who definitely could afford to read a couple books.
Yeah.
And he made the comment something along the lines of like, the people who really need the stuff don't know that they need the stuff. And so like you can give them the book even. They don't have to buy anything. They don't even have to go to the library and get it, but they may not get anything from it. I've been listening to a lot of Jim Rohn stuff on Audible. He's the guy who mentored Tony Robbins and a lot of the other like big name success people. But Jim Rohn is really, really grounded, and I really like his stuff. And he's got this thing. He talks about this, the parable of the sowers, which is a Bible passage. But the basic idea is that you sow seed, and then some of the seed produces a harvest, some of it doesn't. And he even uses the example, like in the Bible verse, it says that the birds come and take some of the seed. And he's like, well, at that point, you got two choices. You can leave your field and go chase the birds, or you can keep sowing more seed. And I thought that was really cool because, like, not all your seed is going to hit the mark. Not everybody that I give a copy of, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, for example, because I buy every copy that I can find and just give it to as many people as I think would actually benefit from it. But his point was that if you give something to somebody and they don't do anything with it, it's not worth questioning why or trying to fix it or getting mad at them because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. He just has this phrase in his Jim Rohn inflection, which I can't imitate. He just goes, "Isn't that interesting?"
Yeah, no, I think there can be a lot of angst around picking up books because we have so much going on. It's very much a cultural norm to have a lot of things moving, which is what we'll get into here. And whenever I tell people that I read a book a week or close to, that always strikes people as what? Like, really? And the assumption is almost like you have no life. Like that's almost what you get the sense of. And I can't help but think that, people just haven't realized that to get into books, like you build up this ability to read at that level. Like you're not going to just decide you're going to read a book a week and start doing that tomorrow. You're not going to do that. Especially if you haven't read a book in its entirety within a year's span. So I tend to tell people, and we've talked about this before, is like find something that you want to solve. Like find a problem that you feel like you want to solve and find a book that talks about that. And that is, I think, one of the easiest ways to get really engaged in a book and to be drawn to it, and it makes it an easier read. And if you do that, then you start to build up over time. The more you do that, you start to build up that endurance and that ability to read at longer levels.
That's a great point, and I brought that up in my conversation this morning, that you should look to read books that are going to solve a problem that you have. My friend Brandon Wentland wrote a post on Asian efficiency. The title of it is "Let Your Biggest Problem Speed Up Your Reading." When you know that the information that you're about to get is going to solve a very real problem that you have, then that's going to provide the motivation to actually do it. For us, with bookworm books specifically, a lot of these like self-development books, these have a lot of times direct application to the stuff that we create, at least for me, online. And so it's very easy to see the correlation there. Whereas like if you're in an industry where self-development, maybe there's not such a clear path between reading these books and becoming the person who is going to be qualified for the position that you want someday. Like if it's not as a direct connection to your ideal future, I can definitely see where like it would be a lot harder to follow through with that.
But this book today can help us understand how to clear some time for it. So let's jump in here. Mastery, stop managing your time. Now, I will say this section on stop managing your time, I really appreciated that because so much of what we've talked about, we even read a whole book about time management, the 168 Hours, Laura Vanderkam.
Yep.
With that, we were talking specifically about how to manage your time to the minute, down maybe even further, depending on how far you want to go. And he starts this whole thing off by saying, don't do that. So, like, okay, well, at least we're not pigeonholed into one view of thinking here. We're at least looking at things that are at opposite ends of the spectrum. But I don't know. I really liked this section, mostly because it does help you get away from the strictness, if you will, of a lot of what we talk about with the productivity world. Like, okay, we're not going to go through this whole managing each minute bit. Like, be okay with a little bit of sloppiness, which I was kind of grateful for. That way people aren't continuing to pound forever efficiency into you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I do a presentation for Asian Efficiency where we talk about the 3 different levels of productivity, or the 3 different pieces to the productivity puzzle. Level 1 is time management. And I think that this is honestly pretty basic. If you've never done anything with time management previously, then yeah, look to manage your time and you'll see some immediate benefit. But for anybody who's been in this space for any length of time or read any sort of self-development book, like that just gets harder and harder to realize gains from, because there's always additional things that you can be doing. So if you're not managing your time and you feel overwhelmed, yeah, managing your time a little bit more effectively can produce the efficiency that you need to create some space. But for everybody who's doing that at some point, there's a level of diminishing returns. And so you have to go beyond managing your time at that point, because everybody's got like the same amount. You can't create more of it. And he talks about like the 3 reasons why time management doesn't work. It doesn't help you regain control. Like I said, it can get you a few more minutes in your day maybe, but it doesn't help you regain control of the direction of the day. Number 2, it will not make you happier. And then number 3, it will not make you more effective. That's really the key. If you want to be effective, if you really want to take action on the things that are going to create your ideal future, then a lot of times it's not the fact that you don't have time to do those things. It's the fact that you don't have the energy maybe to take action on it, or you can't focus long enough on something. We covered deep work. That's what that book is all about, is developing your focus muscles so that when you've got the time to work on something, you can create the energy and the motivation. You've got enough focus muscle that you can laser focus on that thing that you're supposed to be doing and cut out all the distractions and everything. And that's really where you see significant progress.
Yes. Let's just jump into the next one here, churn. Why don't you explain this one?
This one is related because when it comes to managing your time, many people will ask simply in isolation, should I be doing this thing or should I not be doing this thing? And this whole idea of churn here, this is the relentless washing machine spin of gears and concerns. And he talks about Roy Baumeister, who is the guy who did a lot of the willpower studies. And in this study, there were 3 groups. Those who were thinking about an exam before they took it, those who thought about the exam and had a study plan, and then those who didn't think about the exam at all and instead went to a party. And this whole idea of churn, this is basically like being worried about the test even before you would take it, whether or not you're doing anything to prepare for it. They suffered this idea of churn where it's kind of always in the back of your mind and you're thinking about these things. But the ones who had a plan, the ones who wrote down a plan, regardless of what that plan was, regardless of whether it was any good, it basically gave their brain permission to switch off and not worry about those things anymore. So how does this relate to the managing your time and choosing between the different things? Well, everything that you commit to, everything that you sign up for is going to be demanding your attention in the back of your mind to some level, whether you realize it or not. And on page 24, when he's talking about the choices, he mentions that the truth is every choice has a consequence. Each time you choose something, you unchoose something else. So when we try to do everything, we are unchoosing things. When we choose busy, we are unchoosing thinking, creativity, and focused attention. We are unchoosing quality time, relationships, and the joy of deep engagement. Instead, we should be consciously and deliberately choosing not to do things, killing off options in our lives, and work to allow a greater focus on fewer things. Instead of choosing more, we should choose less, and instead of gray, we should choose color. That requires a plan. If you were to write down what are the things that you want to do, what is your life mission, bringing it back to your action items.
Oh, thanks.
Once you have that and you've identified the things that you're going to be doing in any given day, any given month, any given year, you can then measure those things against what is your life mission, would be another way to put it. And you can ask yourself, is this moving me closer to achieving my life mission or my ideal future or whatever other term you want to plug in there? And if you take the time to think through those things and put them in the right order, it's very easy to say no in some of those instances because you can very clearly see like, yeah, this one thing, this opportunity that maybe in isolation seems like maybe I should be doing that. When I take it in context of who I really am and what I want to do, it's really not that important. But if you don't take the time to do those things, then you get stuck viewing those things in isolation. And it's not just where does this fit amongst everything that I need to do? It's just, should I do this? Yes or no? And we can always convince ourselves that, yes, we should be doing one more thing.
You got a few points here I want to follow up on. And one is this concept of if you get it out of your brain, you're not continually rolling it over in your thoughts. And he brought up David Allen's Getting Things Done in this particular section. And I will say it was kind of interesting. He brought up a lot of books that we've read, which is kind of an interesting thing that you start to see happening. Like you start to recognize a lot of authors the more that you do this. But he did bring up the Getting Things Done methodology and the benefit that comes from externalizing the projects and the tasks, the things that are weighing on your mind. And I have to say that, you know, I've moved into an analog way of managing projects and tasks, but at the same time, I've been building out slowly over the last few years, like things like mission statements and higher levels of ideas and philosophies and that sort of thing. Like I've been storing a lot of that just because, one, I need a place to write it down because I feel like I don't fully comprehend what I think about something until it comes out of my head in some way. What's the classic quote on that? Thoughts disentangle themselves across lips and pencil tips. And I think that's absolutely true because how many times, and we were just talking about this earlier, we don't fully understand what we think about this book until we get a chance to sit down and talk it through. So getting it out of your head, in this case, I find that it's a chance for me to really put down to the letter how I feel about a specific topic, whether that's, you know, giving in the church and how much you should or shouldn't give, and in what ways should you give? Do you give direct to the church? Do you give to people in need within the church? Like, there's all kinds of different ways that you can do that. But whenever I need to externalize something like that, I have my own ways of and own places of doing that. So I think this can go even beyond the day-to-day churn, to use his term here. But at the same time, I think there's also this other aspect that gets involved here with the worry bit, because that can be stressful as well. I mean, how many times have I mentioned that I've got something going on with my business and I start to worry about it and trying to make decisions for it, and how do I make the right decision in that case? We even read a whole book on making decisions. And those are things that I find in the same light can cause a lot of angst and makes me frustrated, and then I'm taking that out on my wife or my kids. Like, that's not okay. But again, I feel like I have to, in some cases, talk to someone about it, whether that's talking to you about a book or talking to my wife about the frustrations I've got. In any of those scenarios, I think he's correct here in that you really got to get it out of your head in some way, because if you hold on to it, you tend to make it a lot worse. Like, it's not good.
Yep.
Because you tend to make things, you tend to blow them out of proportion, and you don't always have to articulate how you feel about it. So I totally resonated with that section.
Yeah, he says a little bit later that externalizing your thinking is important. Like, trying to remember everything you need to do is like trying to play chess only in your mind. It's a lot easier when there's an external board.
Right. Just need a chessboard.
And then I think that kind of leads into like the whether or not choices, because when you can see the whole board, you can evaluate how important something is. And one of the quotes that really hit me was the one he shared by President Eisenhower, which really illustrates the fact that there are opportunity costs associated with your choices. The cost of one President Eisenhower once said, the cost of one modern heavy bomber is this: a modern brick school in more than 30 cities. And when you think of it that way, instead of just it costs so many millions of dollars, it's a lot more, there's a lot more weight and importance put on that particular choice. And that importance is there whether you realize it or not. So it's important to note that that stuff is there, because once you get all that stuff out on the external board and you don't have to try to keep it all in your head, then you don't have to constantly be jumping back and forth between different things. I mean, a lot of productivity books will speak to how bad multitasking is. There's a section in this one too. But what I really like about this book is that he uses research just about everywhere. These are not just his thoughts. And he quotes David Meyer's research specifically, showing that the multitasking increases the overall time needed to complete tasks by 40%. He also says that the reason that a lot of people do this is that a small amount of dopamine is released in your brain, which is the pleasure chemical whenever you switch tasks. So you can switch tasks all day and you feel good about it. But when you look at the numbers, when you get it all on that external board, you look back at what you actually accomplished, it's nothing, compared to what you thought in your head.
Yep. This is why people tend to, or want to quantify like the whole self data process of collecting numbers on your own actions and thoughts, and maybe not thoughts, but number of steps, like, and heartbeat and that sort of thing. I think a lot of people want to capture that so that you have numbers that you can't argue with.
Yep, quantified self.
Yeah, there you go.
That's important because you are what you do. You're not what you think you do. And one thing that was kind of impressed on me recently was that consistency can't be inconsistent. So you want to establish a habit of getting up early or going to the gym or whatever it is. Like, let's just use going to the gym as an example. You can't go to the gym 2 days a week and say, oh, for the 5 days that I excused myself from going and I had something else to do, like flip a switch and be like, don't form the habit off of those days. And then turn it back on when you actually do follow through and go to the gym. Okay, there, I did it. Now I want that one to count. Like,
right.
You're creating the habits for all 7 days. And the more that you do that, the stronger those habits become, the more ingrained they become. And you're developing those habits, whether they are through neglect, or maybe they're intentional, but they're still negative, or whether they're intentional and they're positive. So you have to recognize what you're doing and is it the right thing. Now, as it pertains to managing attention, managing your time, I think that a lot of people have developed this habit of distraction. He mentions a Boston College study which found that people underestimate their frequency of distraction by a factor of 10, which is crazy. He said participants estimated that they switched focus every 4 minutes, but they watched their eyes and they actually switched every 14 seconds.
We're really good at this, aren't we?
So you may think that you're focused and you can multitask, but you can't.
Yeah. my wonderful wife made the comment, and I'm aware that I've been getting worse, but she mentioned over lunch, this is 2 hours ago as we're recording, that I've gotten into the habit of checking my phone about every 10 minutes, even when I'm off of work. I was like, no, I don't. And then I started thinking about it, like, all right, I think you're right. So,
yeah,
yep.
We are what we repeatedly do, whether we are aware of it or not.
And we talk about this all the time, too.
Yeah, I know. But, knowledge doesn't translate into action. I was just reading the other day about the 4 different levels of knowledge. Level 1, and this is taken from, I think it's The Power of Potential by Ed Cole. Level 1 is assumption. That's the lowest level. Level 2 is knowledge, so you know what to do. Level 3 is skills, where you can do what you know you're supposed to do. And level 4 is practice or diligence, where you're doing it every single day. It's become a part of who you are. And that's where leadership happens, whether you are leading other people or just leading yourself. And I think that that's really important because it does require personal leadership, personal management in order to put into practice any sort of diligence, any sort of habit that you want to create that's positive is going to be a little bit difficult at first, but the price of diligence up front is much, much less than the price of regret at the end.
Agreed. Let's talk about attention. 2 types of attention. What are the 2 types of attention?
First is directed, which is effortful or focused in Tony's words. And the second one is involuntary. And so the examples that he shares in the book are, number 1, directed when you are working on a project or you're writing a paper or whatever. You have directed attention at the task at hand. And then involuntary, this is more like you're out for a walk and you notice the birds chirping in the trees, or you notice how beautiful your surroundings are. And that's probably at the heart of why so many people in the productivity space say that you should be going for walks outside, because they don't explicitly, at least I never heard people explicitly say that it's recharging your directed attention through involuntary attention. But that really just kind of clicked for me when I heard that.
I think one of the pieces of this that really stuck out to me was he mentioned a book. Of course, I would notice this. Distracted by Maggie Jackson. Definitely wrote this one on my list because he goes into this whole ADHD thing a little bit, and I've talked about before how this is a thing I struggle with. And I think some of this, where the context switching, giving off dopamine, or the more that we can switch, the more pleasure that we get from that, and that all comes from, or can come from, distractions. And I can't help but think that there's so much of these different levels of attention that we continue to degrade a little bit simply because we are so caught up in these switches and distractions, for lack of a better term. And I think this is something I struggle with, definitely, as my wife gratefully pointed out just a little bit ago. So, okay, definitely a thing I need to work on. It's certainly something that I need to continue to be aware of. I'm not really sure how to turn that into an action item here. I tried, but I couldn't really find a specific thing that I felt I wanted to put in place, other than just be aware of it, which is never a great action item. Just be aware of this. It's impossible to really quantify that, because I'm not going to leave my phone elsewhere, because I end up making a number of phone calls and stuff here and there that I feel like I want to have around. And I don't think I'm at a point where I would try to find some other method to handle that. I just need to be aware of it. It's a thing I need to keep in mind.
Nice. And I think that's fine. That's the starting point for all of this stuff. And really the way that he wrote this book, this whole first section on mastery, in my opinion, is kind of like just to show you how much you suck at this so that he has your attention going forward.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
Everything you know is wrong. Now here's what you should do instead.
All right. Fair enough. All right, so differentiation.
This is my minor rant here.
Yeah.
He uses the term productive, and I don't like the way he uses it.
I was okay. So a thing that I do before we start recording is try to take about 15 minutes to look over the outline and then just kind of glance through each section that's on the outline just to kind of get a feel for it. in this case, for the listeners here, I'm looking at Mike's list of items here, and the first two that we're going to talk about quickly, I believe are just kind of points of interest. And the first one, Mike wrote down a wrong definition of productivity. And I was looking through this section trying to figure out where this was at because I didn't recall him defining productivity. So I was trying to find that and realized, wait, Mike wants to rant on what he's talking about for this whole section. All right, so I will quit now. Hit me with your rant.
Okay. Well, the more people I hear kind of define productivity this way, the more I feel like maybe what I'm really getting at then maybe isn't productivity per se. But I think that productivity is more than just cranking out widgets. And on page 81, that's basically how he frames it. He says productivity can provide important advantages over competitors, which can increase profitability, but it will rarely keep you ahead in the long term. So the big issue I have with this is that in his definition here, it's kind of implied that we are competing in an industry and there can be only one winner. And I can do things to increase my quote unquote productivity in the short term, which will put me above you, but they won't keep me there. And I think that in that context, I maybe agree with him, but I think that it really doesn't apply to this book. I mean, this book is not how to become a more productive company by being less busy. This applies to just about anybody. And this whole idea here about being first, about being tops, I believe that this is based on a scarcity mindset. And I think that's dangerous, really dangerous. When you think that there is only so much success to go around, then you have no problem stepping on people to get above them because it doesn't matter who you step on your way up. Once you get there, you're king of the mountain. All right. But just because I achieve my ideal future doesn't mean that you can't. There's not a limited number of ideal futures out there. And if I get one, that means that there's less to go around. Like, there's a lot of opportunity, and really you're the captain of your own ship. You get to decide whether you get there or not. It's just going to be a matter of, are you faithful in the practices and are you diligent in the habits that are going to get you there? I really think the more that I read and study this stuff, like that's what it comes down to, is these simple habits. Like, it's not complicated, but a lot of people won't do it or don't do it simply because they don't make that connection and they don't follow through on it. So I just want to call that out, I guess, that like this whole chapter is called Stop Being So Productive. And there's some good stuff in here. A couple of my action items come from here, but framed that way, it's incorrect, I think.
That's fair. I almost feel like there needs to be a different term for what you're talking about, because you're correct in that we hear productivity a lot. And in the vast majority of cases, you could do a simple find replace with productivity for efficiency, and that's what they mean.
Yep.
In most cases, that seems to be the way that they intend it. So I wonder if there's this mashup of, essentialism, minimalism, productivity sort of thing. Maybe you should coin a term, Mike, for what you mean by all of this.
Not a bad idea. And I know that as someone who works for a company called Agent Efficiency, I get it. But I also think that there's so much more to productivity than just being efficient. We read the book by Peter Drucker, and he talks a lot about effective versus efficient. And I think that there's middle ground where if you can achieve both, then you're really making progress. There's efficiency that's important. You don't get to choose, I'm just going to apply this mindset to this one area of my life. Your values, your views, they're going to permeate everything that you do, unless you are intentionally a hypocrite, you say one thing and you do another. And so that's why it's dangerous to be in a situation work-wise where you have to compromise on your morals or your standards, and the company wants you to do this, because if you start to make concessions in one particular area, those will apply to your entire life. You can't separate those two. Going back to the whole idea of the work-life balance and how that's completely not true. Like, you don't get to choose between this is who I am at work, this is who I am in life. Like, the habits that you establish are going to apply to every single area of your life. And so, I don't know. I mean, the people that I've heard define it, they've always applied it to specifically a work context in terms of the actual output of a machine. And I just think that that is wrong, especially today. I mean, there's a whole industry built up around this idea of productivity, and I don't think that it's all just figuring out how to squeeze a few more hours out of the people beneath you.
He mentioned Mahali in this book.
He did.
Which we always have to point out. Mahali, I think, and we read his book, and I think it's interesting just how many different ways you can pull his research into so many different topics, from busyness to grit to willpower. I mean, it comes out a lot. So we have to point it out. So, hi, Mahali.
Yep. And specifically in this particular context, he calls out something which is a little bit different. He references the flow research, but the point that he was making in this particular book I thought was a little bit different, which is why I wanted to call it out. He said that according to Mahali's research, which this I don't think was really touched on in the book that we read, he said that finding the solution was easy, finding the right question was hard. Once the question was discovered, the ideas flowed freely. I think this is a really powerful idea. And I've kind of seen this happen myself in a couple different areas. One of the things that I've done recently is we've kind of revamped our family meeting structure. And really what we've focused on are 3 questions. What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? And what should we keep doing? And it's been amazing to me that when I have like an hour of time, we go to dinner or whatever with my wife, we think about those questions, the results that we get and the clarity that we get regarding like, okay, this is what we need to do next. And it just was a great illustration to me of this point that once you have the right questions, finding the solutions becomes a lot simpler.
And I think those particular questions, I think they're designed to help you point yourselves in the right direction. Because I love those questions. It's a thing that I think I want to steal a little bit. But, and the next section here is about building your brand. And I just want to pause and talk about the culture of busyness, because we haven't really done that yet, Mike. And I feel like this is kind of a big point, because there's so much of our general conversations where I'm busy. Like, how are you? I'm busy. Like, okay, great. Not great. So
right.
He does call out, like, this is a thing where there's a competition of who has the more stressful, the more jam-packed schedule. And it comes out just in general social conversations all the time. And when I started reading this, I started trying to pay attention to that more. It's a thing I knew about, knew it was a problem, but I can't say that I've ever tried to focus on how often it comes out. And it's kind of nuts how frequently this whole dynamic of how much you have going on and how overloaded you are, like, that comes out all the time. And just for fun, I was at church for a function a couple nights ago, and there was a member of our small group that was there, and he came up. I had just sat down, was going to be there for about an hour with nothing in particular I needed to be doing, and he just asked me how things were going. And I just, instead of saying I'm busy or anything along those lines, I just told him I'm learning to not be busy. That led to a 1-hour conversation. So, like, okay, well, this is a thing that is a problem, and it's prevalent pretty much everywhere. But it's not easy to break. I still find myself talking about how much is going on and need to stop, I think, partially because I need to scale back on the number of things that I'm doing. And it's a thing, that's a piece I've been working on for a while. But the brand, I use that term there, of busyness is just wrong. Like, we need to get away from that.
Yeah, well, just to back up a little bit, because we're in section 2, but section 1 was mastery. On page 45,
right.
He says, busyness is bad, but that doesn't mean full and active lives are bad. Days and lives crammed with deep immersion in projects, interactions, and experiences that are truly meaningful to you are the juice of life. That is mastery. And so that's important to call out, that just because you've got a bunch of things going on doesn't mean that you're quote unquote busy,
right?
And you need to dial stuff back. Now, maybe you are, and you do have to dial stuff back. I think that's probably a safe assumption.
Yes,
if you're just getting introduced to this concept. But I do want to call that out, because you're right. Busy is a terrible brand. I'm glad you brought up that example, because that's exactly what I was thinking of. Is like, you go somewhere to a social function, you see somebody that maybe you don't see every day, and they ask you, "Hey, how's it going?" What's your initial response? Like, try to do anything except, "Oh man, I'm so busy." Like,
yes.
It feels weird. And that's wrong. I've been trying to shift that, to call out like specific things, or like, your example, what have you been up to? And be like, "Oh yeah, I've been working on this project or whatever." But busy is kind of like the easy answer, where no one can push back. If you were to say to somebody like, "Oh, I've been working on this project," like, they could say, "Well, that's a dumb idea."
Yeah.
All right. And they could point out 100 reasons why that's a waste of your time. But when you say, "Oh man, I've been so busy," like, what do you say to that?
Right. You're not going to argue with me.
Yeah, exactly.
You might try to one-up me, but you're not going to argue.
Right. Which is sometimes what happens. But I think that's maybe at the root of that is like, it's a protective thing, where it's like, as long as I don't say what I'm actually doing, they can't have any issue with it.
Right.
So, but yeah, I like this whole idea of building your brand intentionally. Another thing that I thought of regarding your brand at the moment is, if you were to have one word that describes your life, and you were to ask your kids, for example, or your wife, or whoever is closest to you, what is that word? It may shock you. I know, like, kids specifically, they're really perceptive. And there's a couple things in here which action items specifically that apply to my situation with my kids, but I think that you could apply this in a lot more broad context. And if you really want to get an idea on what you're portraying, what brand you are putting out there, like, do that exercise. Ask somebody close to you, what's one word that you would use to describe me? And if it's busy, like, something's got to change.
Right.
Which is really where this whole idea of what are your 5 words comes in. I did it as I was reading it, just because I knew that if I left that page, I would probably forget about it. There's a whole bunch of words, and basically you're supposed to select the 5 that best describe you. That's your personal brand. And there's a bunch of them on there. The ones that I came up with, and this is just my perspective, so take that for what it's worth. But this was a cool exercise for me, because part of it is what you currently do, but part of it also is recognizing that, this is what I want to be known for. Because what I found is that there were more than 5 that I could apply to me, and then trying to rank those, this is kind of what I landed on. Logical, perceptive, purposeful, sincere, insightful. Now, depending how well you know me, you can probably point out at least one instance where I've failed in those things. But I think there's a lot of value in recognizing that these are the words that resonate with me. This is who I really am and who I want to portray. Whenever I master busyness enough to let these things come out, like, this is who I am. But, if we're not careful, then busyness can drown these.
Yeah, I like this concept a lot. And like, I've played around, and we've talked a lot about like goal setting and how do you hold yourself accountable to things. But I think this can be a way to do that if you have these 5 things or these aspects of your character that you want to be known for, as opposed to being known as busy, which all of these are better, in my opinion.
Exactly. That's really the point he's trying to make, is like, any one of these things that you could pick instead of busy is going to be an improvement.
Right. So I like this idea, and I've played around with the idea of, people talk about their yearly themes, and I've played around with the concept of like quarterly themes, because I feel like the 3-month bit handles a lot better in my world. And so I've played around with that, but I feel like this can be kind of an overarching view. And there's a lot of these things that we've come across in the past, like life goals and missions and, your areas of responsibility. And like, we come across these sorts of things quite a bit. But to be honest with you, whenever you review these sorts of things, they're pretty quick to review. So it doesn't seem like it's a huge deal to add one of these to it. So yeah, I'm going to try to figure out what my 5 are. I haven't done it, but I'll do my best to get it done by next time. That way our action list doesn't continue to grow.
This is kind of like beginning steps to figuring out really like what your own path is going to be. The next step is to come up with a sentence that describes you. And on page 124, I put just in my notes, unique ability, because I think that what he was speaking to is directly what that book that I mentioned as a gap book, A Unique Ability, is all about. It's identifying what is unique about you, what is the skill set that you have that really like only you can do, the thing that you were made to do. What is the thing that really just is the sweet spot for you? And most people don't take the time to figure that out. Now, I've been going through that workbook, going through the exercises. I sent out these emails. I sent one to you.
Yep.
Which is honestly really scary when you send those out. It feels so weird. And they give you a form template to work off of. I customized the heck out of it, but I didn't want it to seem like a form email. But that's really hard. Where basically, a part of the Unique Ability workbook is you send out these emails to 10 people or so that are close to you. And you ask them, what do you think my unique ability is? What are the things that you think I'm good at? What are the skills that you think I have? And then you kind of distill all that down and you see what the themes are and what other people say. And it was my experience that every single email that I got back, it was amazing to read through those. And it was really, really cool to see what other people projected about me. One thing that somebody said through one of those emails, which I thought was just awesome. And I never really thought about it this way, but really just shows the value of getting those outside opinions. They said that you connect people to their own creativity. And I was like, that's my sentence.
Is it fair if you steal what someone else says? Can you do that?
I don't know. I mean, if going through all that feedback, I mean, that's kind of the theme, but the way that they said it, I'm like, oh yeah, that really resonates with me. Yeah. And so I guess I'll throw that out there just as, I've just gone through that myself, that if this concept appeals to you, then it's a small section in this book, which is cool. But if you really want to dive into it, check out Unique Ability 2.0.
Yeah, I put it on a list. That list is long. So
yeah. And it's not quick. I mean, it's not one of the things where like, I'm going to read this book this week as a gap book or anything. It takes time. You send out these emails, and I procrastinated on it for days because I
didn't want to do it.
Yeah, I couldn't bring up the courage to be like, hey, can you send me something nice about myself?
Yeah.
Like, that feels really, really weird.
Puff up my ego.
But it was one of the most, it was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done though. Like the feedback that I got was just amazing. And it really highlighted a lot of things. One of the things that one of my friends wrote in the email was, in addition, like a piece of radical candor. He's like, you tend to give credit quickly to other people for your ideas, but by synthesizing them and you always put your own spin on it, you really don't need to do that. You've earned the right to speak to these things. And immediately when I read that, I remembered when I was a freshman in college, I had a professor that did not like me. I was pretty vocal about my faith and we had differing views. Just leave it there. One of the papers we had to write was a book report, and she accused me of plagiarism and said she was going to take me in front of the academic court and get me kicked out of college. And I was like, I didn't plagiarize that. She said, well, you didn't cite your sources correctly. I'm still going to give you an F. And so my grade in that class went from an A to a C because of that one paper. I never realized how much that impacted me until I got that email back. And instantly I thought of that and I'm like, oh my gosh, I am still changing how I approach stuff because that one person had a vendetta against me. And I realized that like, that's completely wrong. I shouldn't be letting that dictate my course in my future anymore.
So you procrastinated sending out these emails for a few days, but I will say that as someone who received one of these emails and having been through a lot of these books and through training seminars and such in the past, like this is a thing that I have done to some extent or another. And I know that they're really hard to send out, but a lot of people are more than willing to respond to those genuinely and understand the process that you're working through and what it is you're trying to accomplish. So for those listening, like if you're encouraged to do this, like, don't be afraid of that because the vast majority of people are more than willing to help out. And I run across very few people who receive one of these and just don't understand and just don't do it. Like you just don't run across that very often. So it's rare. So send it out. Don't be afraid of it.
Right. But bottom line, whatever format you use, definitely figure out what's your unique, I guess I'll just use the term unique ability. I can't think of a better one, and start building your own personal brand. I think that that's a really important idea and one of the big things I got out of this book.
Fair enough. Let's talk procrastination, the 3 causes of it.
Yeah, so this is an interesting section here because I think there's a lot of people who speak to procrastination and give like tips and tricks, little life hacks, whatever, to help you overcome procrastination. But he talks about 3 different causes. Dependence, I'll do it when I need to, the deadline's coming up. Inertia and mood, and the little acronym he's got for this is DIM. The mood thing, that's I don't feel like it. And then he explains that this is because your mood is determined by the balance of 2 different chemicals. So one is dopamine, and do you know how to pronounce this other one? I'm not sure. It's like norepinephrine. But basically, he breaks this down into there's 4 different scenarios, basically, when you don't feel like doing something that it can fall into. And this just really just highlighted to me his approach to everything in this book, and I really like this, where it's all based on research, but he distills it down and like these are the main points. So number 1, if you don't have enough dopamine, that's the pleasure chemical, then you should use the reversal theory and you should have fun with the tasks. Second, you could be having too much dopamine, in which case you should switch off all those distractions to reduce the multitasking which produces it. Number 3, not enough of the other one. I don't know how to say it. And then the tactic in that particular case is you need to scare yourself with what could go wrong if you don't deliver. And then the last one, you've got too much norepinephrine or whatever you call it. And in that case, what you need to do is break the task down. So all of these tactics I've heard before, but it was cool to see him explain it in a way that you can figure out specifically what is the cause of you not feeling like taking action on this thing. And then you can use the correct strategy for that particular scenario. I thought that was a cool approach.
I think it's either norepinephrine or norepinephrine. One of those 2 I would go with.
Both of those sound better than mine. So,
yeah, no, I did appreciate specifically that piece with the mood side of it, because I know that is a thing that I have struggled with in the past. And my wife will tell you that I used to put things off all the time just because I didn't feel like working on them at that time. And she mentioned to me at one point that if I don't feel like I'm going to be in the mood for something and I'm waiting for that mood to happen, I'll never get it done. Okay, you're probably right. Because she's usually right on those things. So I listened to her, and that's been a long time. That's probably been 6 years ago or better now, maybe longer. And I have been actively working against that one for a long time. So I've been able to, I think, get past that bit. But I think the key here is, like, there's going to be one of these 3 that I think you fall into the most. Not everyone, I think, falls into procrastination in general. I mean, everyone procrastinates to some extent on something, but some are way better at, say, the work instance than others. And I think the key is just knowing which of these causes you struggle with and then determine how you're going to overcome those.
Yeah, the big takeaway, I think, is one of the first points he makes in this section is when under pressure to perform, don't act, think.
Yeah.
Figure out what's really going on, and then you have a much better chance of effectively dealing with the reason why you don't want to do this thing right now. And even like procrastination, this is something that everybody deals with. And there are some people who are just driven by those deadlines. But I guess like the thing could be when you're doing your weekly review and you know this thing is coming up and you know you should start working on it, but you aren't yet. Like, what are the ways in that particular scenario that you should try so that you don't have to be so stressed as it comes down to the wire? I think there's a lot of value in figuring that out. And a lot of times what it takes is stepping back a little bit, not just doing something, but thinking about what is the right thing to do in this particular scenario.
Section 3, engagement. The 3 sections here. So this is the last one. First one's mastery. Second one's differentiation. And the last one is engagement.
Yeah, so there's a lot of really cool stuff in here. I think I have the most notes about this particular section. The first chapter in this section is called Stop Striving for More. And there's a research study that he quotes on page 167 by Mark Lepper and David Green, which I thought was really interesting. And this is the first point here, love versus job. So in this particular study, they asked children to draw for a couple of minutes, and they rewarded some of the children for their drawing. The kids that were not rewarded were twice as likely to draw afterwards when there was no reward. They had intrinsic motivation. They just liked drawing. The extrinsic motivation to get the reward made that joy into a job. And I think that there's a lot of people that this applies to. It's not just kids. If you're working on a side project, and you finally get that thing launched and it becomes your business, at that point, like your whole attitude towards that thing could completely change. That's really sad. It doesn't have to be that way. Just because you figured out a way to get paid for the thing that you really enjoy doing doesn't mean that you have to stop enjoying doing that thing.
It's true. I think there's a lot of interesting points to this, but the one that I think that stands out the most to me actually is a recall of, and I'm going to do it here too, Flow by Mahali. There's a lot of points in Flow that are geared towards finding the aspects of the work that you're doing that make it enjoyable. And he has all of his different aspects that help you understand how to do that. But I think the most important one is that you need to find an internal challenge or find something inside yourself that enjoys a thing and use that as your driver to accomplish something, as opposed to higher dollar amounts or, somebody's praise. Like, those pieces are nice, but they're not going to keep you going for 10 years. They'll keep you going for 10 weeks, maybe 10 months, but not indefinitely. So twisting it to a point where you're using that aspect internally, to me, that was the piece that I got out of this, which was trying to turn that inside to myself. Because I work with all kinds of clients on a weekly basis. And although it's great to see the excitement from them and, frankly, a paid invoice from them, between those two, that's great. But I take more joy in seeing the product completed and looking good than I do from either one of those. So I really do think you have to turn that internally.
Yeah, exactly. He mentions that wealth doesn't equal what we have. Wealth equals what we can do. And the more resources you have, the more options you have, maybe. But the tendency can be to, especially once you start to realize some financial success, I got to have more. I got to have more. And I think that's really dangerous. You can essentially, if you had that approach, you're never really going to be satisfied. If all you want is a little bit more, then once you get a little bit more, you're going to find that you feel hollow and empty, and you're going to need just a little bit more. Joseph Campbell, he mentions in this section that the holy grail is your purpose in life. And the best way to success is to consciously focus on your values first and seek to grow your capabilities in those areas. Let's say you're working on something. Maybe you're at the very beginning, Joe, you had a different job and you really wanted to become a web developer, and you just really craved the autonomy that would provide you, and you really liked writing the code. Okay, so the tendency can be, once you achieve that situation, that you view your job not as something that you get to do anymore, but something that you have to do. And I think that you can switch those at any point, and it's very important to do that. That you have to view what you are currently doing, especially if it's something that is in line with who you want to become and what you want to, your life mission. If it's in line with your core values, then there's no reason to be looking for something else that's better. You can be satisfied in that thing that you get to do.
And his main point here is that you're trying to become more engaged in the work that you do. And, this is a thing we've talked about in a number of episodes and covered a lot of books on that, but we haven't really delved into too much of becoming more engaged in the relationships that we have with other people. We have a little bit, we did Brene Brown's Daring Greatly, which kind of touches that realm to some extent. As much as we didn't care for the book itself, Amanda Palmer's book talked about it quite a bit. Maybe her methods are a little out there, but, but in this particular book, he does touch on this to a point, more about the number of people that you should be engaged with. And one of those that he brought up as far as the number of people was Dunbar's number, which is kind of a semi-famous number to some extent, which is basically the number of relationships that you are able to maintain mentally, basically the number of people that you're able to stay in contact with to some extent or another.
Yeah, so if you log on to Facebook and you see that you have 800 Facebook friends, that's not true because Dunbar's number is 150. That's the number of relationships a person can actually manage. That's important, but also he's got like 3 different tiers that he uses under Dunbar's number. So you have 150 people. The next group is 15, and then at the top you've got your five people who are your closest circle. So from inside out, you've got 5 people who are really, really close to you. Next, you've got 15. And this is the group that he says determines your life satisfaction. That was the point that really stood out to me was who are these 15 people and what am I allowing them to say and to speak over my life? Jim Rohn said it this way, to ask yourself about the people that you're associated with. Basically, who am I around? What are they doing to me? And then is that okay? So recognizing like the people that you're around all the time, they are speaking words over your life, and they're either words that are going to help you grow or they're words that are maybe going to keep you small. And I really think that there's a lot of value in identifying those 15 people. So that's one of my action items is to write all those down. But then also I've got another action item associated with that. How can I give to my 15? Because my last action item, for today, give more than I take. I believe that the way to foster those relationships is not just to take, going back to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the emotional bank account, how can I make deposits instead of withdrawals with those 15 people?
Yeah, I wrote down that I want to figure out who these 15 people are as well as an action item. But I know that this isn't an easy thing to do. And it's also kind of odd to basically be ranking your friends. Like that seems kind of weird.
Right.
So I was hesitant to even really talk about it just because it just seems weird to some level. Like it seems very impersonal, but at the same time, I get what he's saying, and I think there is some value in it. It just feels a little odd.
It does feel a little odd. I will give you that. Another thing related to this is on page 189. This is something that I texted my wife. He says, if we do allow busyness to steal the micro moments, we disembowel relationships. And I think that specifically with your 15, the people that you are probably closest to, there are lots of opportunities for busyness to steal those micro moments when, like, I'll just use my kids as an example because you can really see it on a kid's face. Like if they're trying to tell you something and then your phone, even if it's like over in the corner and it buzzes and you look at it, you can see the disappointment on their face. So that was a picture that I got when I read that section. But I think that this applies to just about everybody that you are close to. Like recognize that those micro moments are there. And then I texted my wife and I shared that section of the book. And then I'm like, new rule, no looking at your phone when we're together. Not just for her, for me too, because you need to recognize that this is actually happening. And no one would, I'm not going to say out loud, like, hey, this Twitter mention is more important than you, but that's really what I'm saying when I let that sort of thing happen. So I guess if I were to give, one piece of advice for once you list out your 15 and you really want to start building those relationships, it would be put the phone away.
Yeah, fair point. And kind of tangential to this is our next point here, the Losado ratio, which I thought was interesting because I hadn't really thought about this, but a man by the name of Losado, he transcribed some meeting minutes and essentially found that the number of positive comments compared to the number of negative comments, that ratio could be used to determine whether or not the business was in a good place or not. And the number, if I remember correctly, where the break point was 2.9. So if you have 2.9 positive comments per one negative comment, you are much more likely to have a successful business on your hands. And I did think it was interesting that people have been taking this ratio and then determining what that ratio is for things like your marriage or a friendship and such. And if numbers are sticking in my brain correctly, 5.0, so 5 positive comments for one negative comment was an indicator of a healthy marriage. So I don't know. I thought this ratio was interesting. I hadn't really thought about that concept before, but it was an encouragement to think about, okay, within the relationships that I have, say I've got this list of 15, am I maintaining that, I'll call it 3.0, of 3 positive comments per 1 negative? Am I maintaining that? And I don't know that I am, because I am not sure that I've really ever paid any attention to it, but it is an interesting idea that I do want to make myself more aware of.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, specifically in a marriage context, because I think that the people that are closest to you have the greatest potential to hurt you as well. Ed Cole said it this way: marriage is the closest thing to heaven or hell you'll know on this earth.
Right.
He also makes a distinction, by the way, of love being the desire to benefit others at the expense of self, and lust being the desire to benefit self at the expense of others. I think that's really played out in these positive versus negative comments. Like, if you are focusing on everything that your spouse is doing wrong, this ratio is going to be low. And in that case, I'd say you're in lust mode, where it's like, you're the one who's the problem. You need to fix things. But there's a lot of people, and Ed Cole, like, he's kind of the father of the men's ministry movement. So he's worked with lots and lots and lots of people, and he's seen marriages change when, I mean, he's a minister to men specifically. So when the man makes the change and says, hey, and changes the focus, instead of like, hey, you need to fix this, this, and this, but what can I do? What can I change? What do I do that bugs you? And then when you put the other person first, that naturally is going to produce a lot of the gratitude in those positive comments. But also, there's another section here about busyness making you more selfish, and he's got statistics of these trainee priests where only 10% stopped to help a man when they were later in a rush, but 63% stopped when they had more time. And there's a couple things that spoke to me from this section, specifically with my kids. When you say something like, wait a minute, that is, in a child's mind, specifically a negative comment. You may not think of it that way, but the point that Tony makes in this book is to pause the busyness, not your kids. And so even if you're going to measure this, if you were to record your entire conversation, the Amazon Echo is recording everything that you say and you play it all back. Think about this through the perspective of the other person, because you may not see that, wait a minute as a negative thing, but it can be, because it's showing where your priorities lie. You need to make the main thing the main thing. I use that phrase, pause the busyness, not your kids, and it sounds kind of extreme, but really, like, that's what's happening. Like, I think you had an action item at one point to whenever you were using your phone and someone was in your presence, you were going to be saying what you were doing on your phone.
Right.
That's the acid test. Like, if I'm on Twitter instead of paying attention to you, then I am saying that Twitter is more important than you, whether that's what I mean to say or not.
Right. That was the thing I did. Oh, you're going to make me bring this up again, aren't you? My oldest, Emma, basically I had told her, it's okay to ask me what I'm doing on my phone if you see me on my phone. And there's a conversation you don't really want to have a whole lot.
Right.
Like, okay, I'm on my phone. Dad, what are you doing? Oh, I told you it was okay to ask me that question. And I'm on Twitter and I don't want to admit it. Okay, like that'll get to you quick. So given my current state of being aware that I'm back into a bad habit with that, I should probably say it's okay that she does that again.
There's a lot of value in that, because it's making it abundantly clear what is actually going on. And are you okay with knowing the truth about yourself? That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And I think that is the difference between somebody who has a growth mindset and the whole quantified self. Like, that's all built on this idea of, what am I doing? Not what do I think that I'm doing? And then how can I make improvements to this? How can I do better? Because we've all got room for improvement, but it's kind of sad to me sometimes that I see people who just put on the rose-colored glasses, or maybe they just have resigned themselves to the fact that, like, this is the way things are. There's nothing I can do about this. Things are never going to change. Jim Rohn said, it will all change for you when you change. And so I want to know all the things that I'm doing wrong. In fact, I asked my wife the other day, I said, what are the things that I do that drive you nuts? And she's like, oh, do I really have to tell you? I'm like, yes. Because I want to not do those anymore. And yeah, it can be uncomfortable, but it's important.
Yeah, it really is. Change is hard. It's never fun. I get that.
Yeah, and actually, that's another thing that I really like about this book in particular is he's got all these different sections. He's got all this information, and a lot of books, like that's where they would end it. But the last chapter here, he talks about page 229. He says, we still seem to believe that if we know something and decide something and are sufficiently motivated, we will change. And he's basically like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So he gives you 7 strategies for implementing the personal change. Just real quickly, I'll run through these 7 different strategies just to call them out. So number 1, make your goals clear. Number 2, keep it really small. Number 3, plan your next step. Number 4, use social influence. Number 5, slipstream your habits. Number 6, reward good behavior. And then number 7, I've titled What the Heck? And basically the idea here is he uses the example of dieting, where if somebody has something and breaks their diet, they're much more likely to keep overeating than they are to say like, okay, well, I've done that. Now I can go back to the way that I should be acting. And so basically defeating that behavior and recognizing that just because you messed up once doesn't mean that everything that you've done previously is now out the window. There's value in establishing these habits, and you're not going to be perfect, but just recognizing the fact that these are going to produce the change that you are looking for. And if you mess up, give yourself some grace. Don't beat yourself up. Just keep going. Don't say, well, I guess that I'm completely off the rails now. It didn't work. Just be willing to adjust and repair. And I thought this was great because it's like, okay, so you've read this, maybe you're convinced of this. Now, while you're convinced, before you even put this book down, here are some suggestions for actually translating this into action.
That might be a good place to end it right there. Like, this is all about how much you have going on, how we have this culture of saying how much we have going on, and a lot of tactics around how to get away from that. And when you work through all of these tactics, and you know a lot of the aspects that lead up to a too busy life, you have to put certain things in place, and you have to follow through on those. I mean, we talk about it all the time, maybe every show, about how the action items and the follow-up that comes with those and holding each other accountable to these is one of the best things that comes out of the show. And that is a piece that he is asking you to do here, is decide and actually move forward with some change, and don't just be complacent and just run with status quo of busy. All right, so let's talk action items. I have 3. Mike has a bunch.
I probably could have had double, to be honest.
You decided to cut it in half?
Yep.
All right, so the 3 I have, and I think I've talked about all of them. I want to stop saying I'm busy and replace that with the phrase, I've decided not to be busy. And I chose that wording carefully because my hope is that whenever that phrase is used, it can convey the idea that this is a decision, number 1, and that I am deciding against it. So it does convey those 2 different aspects to the busy culture, or against the busy culture, if you will. So that is number 1. I will probably screw that one up a few times. Just saying. 2, I want to list my 15 closest peeps. Like, that's a thing that I want to do. I think there's some value in that. Just still feels weird. Still weird. And then the one that I developed in the middle of recording this, what are my 5 brand words? I knew that I wanted to do this. I just didn't get it written down. So I am going to go through with that. I'll share them next time if I've got them done, because it's been busy.
All right. So for me, I've also got listing out my 15 related to that. How can I give to my 15? So I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that. Maybe for every person that I identify, I have one specific thing that I could do to make a deposit instead of a withdrawal. Might be a way to implement that. I've also put on here, stop saying, wait a minute, to my kids. And this really impacted me when I read that. So I feel like I've kind of already been doing this. But yeah, we should definitely check in on that next time. I put make time to help people. I forget specifically which section this came from, but I don't want to be selfish because I'm busy. I want to be able to give more than I take. And I think that putting aside specific time in order for that to happen is one way to make sure that it does happen. Kind of along those same lines, he mentioned in the first section this concept of rules of engagement, which I don't think I've ever really done. So basically what this is going to be is clearly written guidelines for if somebody wants me to do X, then these are the rules that pertain to me being able to say yes to that sort of a thing. And I think that being able to define that for side projects, even for things like people want to meet for coffee or whatever, like I think that if I created rules of engagement around that, it'd be a lot easier to just look at my calendar and be like, oh yeah, I set aside Friday mornings for this. Okay, Friday mornings are open. So it'd be a lot easier to say yes to the right things for that as well. So that's kind of my definition of the rules of engagement. He also mentions creating a monthly plan template, which is, I think, a really good idea. I've already done that for my daily thing, so I want to take that a step further and create something to help me theme my months. And then the other thing I have on here, he introduces this idea by these two guys for a balanced scorecard. And I think this specifically pertains in the business world, but I want to apply this to my own life. So what are the 4 things basically that I want to keep score on that are going to be true indicators of whether what I am doing is working? Going back to like the 4 disciplines of execution, you've got the lead measures, you've got the lag measures. Well, I think when it comes to businesses, even if you're focusing on the lead measures, you can have 200 different lead measures to be tracking and not have any time to do the actual work. And so my takeaway from that particular section was that whatever your situation, organization, whatever, you can distill it down to just a handful of things that are really moving the needle, the 80-20. And so I want to identify what my 4 things are.
All right. That's quite the list.
That is quite the list.
You think you can get through all this in 2 weeks?
We will see.
All right. Well, we'll talk about it next time and go from there. So talk to me about author style and what do you rate this?
Well, I mentioned at the beginning, I was very pleasantly surprised by this book. I really did not expect a whole lot, to be honest. Kind of figured that just skimming through it, that it was going to be a rehash of a lot of productivity stuff and then put in a specific order and the guy was going to say, hey, here's my system sort of a thing, but that's not really what it was at all.
Right.
It was a lot of great information, a lot of research behind everything. He did a great job of distilling down the main points, I thought. I really like the flow of the entire book. I really like how he starts by addressing the main objections for even reading it in the first place, and he ends with the action steps to make sure, or strategies to put this into action. So I really liked a lot of this book. The one thing that is going to keep me from giving it 5 stars is the whole section on stop being so productive, just because I personally have an issue with how he defined it.
All right.
And it's more than just the definition. Like I said, the scarcity mindset versus the abundance mindset. I think that for me anyways, like that was a really big revelation. That was something that really changed a lot of things for the better in my life. And so I think that that's, like I said earlier, when we were discussing that section, I think it's dangerous. And even if you were to recognize that, this is a little bit off, maybe there's limited value in that particular section, but the rest of it I thought was great. So I'm going to give it 4.5 stars.
I can say that I really appreciate the vast number of stories and research that he put into this. There's a lot there and makes it really hard to argue with. The piece that I struggled with was connecting some of the dots on, like, okay, how does this apply to being busy? Like that part I got a little bit confused by, to an extent. Not a lot, but just to a point. I had a number of points where like, okay, well, why are we talking about this? Because this book's about busyness, right? So I had a few points where I was a little bit thrown off because of that. Those are minor overall. But I will say I'm going to rate this at a 4.0. And part of the reason for that is that I really enjoyed reading this, but I can't say that there was any major, like, oh yeah, that'll change my life. Like, I really didn't feel like there was, I mean, there's a lot of little stuff that you can pick up from this, but there wasn't anything major that I felt like was stand out. You got to read this. This is exactly what you need right now. It doesn't really hit that spot on the radar for me. So I'm going to put it at the 4.0.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that, by the way. And I think that it's interesting depending on your position as you read this particular book, because there's a lot of books that, we talked about last time, I think, that if we were to go back and reread Getting Things Done, we're not going to rate that a 5 anymore.
Right.
But when it's the first time that you're introduced to a particular subject, like really can rock your world. For this one, I guess going into it, I wasn't looking for a radical new idea, but what I found were a lot of great suggestions based on the number of action items that I have. Like, I think that there's a ton of value in this for me, but it's in the small adjustments to things that I'm currently already doing, or maybe I'm doing them in a little bit different way, and the way that he phrased it makes more sense to me. So I think that, yeah, you're right. Depending on the approach that you take to this, and also your position in life, like that could determine what you get out of this. It's not going to be, okay, just follow these 3 steps and your life is going to change forever. But there's going to be a lot of little things in here.
Yes. So upcoming books, we've talked a little bit about relational books coming up and talked a little bit about family bits. So our next one is actually a repeat author, which I don't think we've done before, have we? We've not repeated an author, I don't think.
I don't think so.
So this is Patrick Lencioni's The 3 Big Questions for a Frantic Family. And I believe the only thing I need to say about this is that it was recommended by your wife.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure to rate this highly, but I promise to give it a fair and objective rating.
Okay. All right, I'll hold you to that.
All right. The one after that is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which is another one of those books that probably everybody has heard about. And I'm kind of thinking, based on our experience with like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Think and Grow Rich, stuff like that, even Viktor Frankl, that maybe it isn't what I think it is. And so I want to dive into it and really understand what he's saying, because everything I've heard about Dale Carnegie has been really positive. But generally speaking, like if you were to go out on the street and take a poll of what people think about how to win friends and influence people, I would say that the public perception of this book is not that positive. So I want to get to the heart of this one.
I feel like this book is a polarizing book.
Exactly. Yep.
Like some people absolutely love it, which I feel like are usually upper management CEO types. Maybe I'm off on that. And a lot of other people don't get it and think it's a terrible book. Like that's my perception.
Could be. I mean, you remember what I thought of Who Moved My Cheese, so.
Yeah, fair.
All right. And then for Gap Books, I'm reading Profit First, which is really written to business owners, and the basic idea is set aside money for your profit first. It's, if you were to apply this in a personal context, it's set aside money for your savings account before you try to pay your bills. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but it's an entertaining read.
Yeah, I saw the pumpkin plan on our recommended list, and that one may actually make it into the mix sooner rather than later, just because I was looking at all of our recommended books on Amazon and noticed that one has a large number of reviews, and yet it's still a 5.0 rating on that particular one. So that's kind of rare for that level. My Gap book is Unstuck by Matt Perman. This is a pre-launch advanced copy that I was given. I think I mentioned this last time, but I'm actually diving into it in depth. I guess that's tonight. So I'm jumping into that one and plan to chronicle my path through it. I'll note he's the author of What's Best Next, the book we did last time. So kind of a follow-up to that one. But something you'll notice with some of these is we're starting to pull from our recommended book list quite a bit. So if you have one that you want to get onto that list, bookworm.fm/recommend. Fill out that form, send it in, hits my email, and then I do my best to get it into that recommended list on the site as soon as I can. And if you want to see the ones that are already recommended, again, bookworm.fm/list, and you can see all of those there as well. And if you are following along and want to help support the show in some way, if you go to that list, it has the Amazon link. Those are affiliate links. So if you want to pick up any of these books, you do us a favor and click on those particular links, and we get a little bit of a kickback from that.
Yeah, and you can also help us out if you are so inclined by going to iTunes and leaving us a review. KCRW is still the number 1 result for Bookworm, which I've made it my personal mission to dethrone them. So please help me out. And then, as we talked about at the beginning, if you want to join the podcast book club, the internet's largest book club, unofficially.
The unofficial largest internet book club.
Yeah. Club.bookworm.fm. Did I get the URL right?
You got it right.
All right, cool.
Well done, Mike. Yeah, I would love to see some of those conversations take off there. I think that's a cool idea. But if you are reading along and want to join us on the next journey, The 3 Big Questions for a Frantic Family by Patrick Lencioni. And we will dive into that one next time.